In Assyrian mythology, the Tree of Life was an important religious symbol, although Assyriologists have not yet come to a consensus as to its meaning within the ancient Assyrian ethos. In Mesopotamia, there's also a plant in the Epic of Gilgamesh which grants eternal life. Genesis draws on these motifs, among other influences from Mesopotamian mythology. Genesis 2:9 states, "And Yahweh God caused to grow every tree that was pleasing to the sight and good for food. And the tree of life was in the midst of the garden, along with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil." After the first humans had eaten from the tree of knowledge, God cursed them and said in Genesis 3:22-24, "Look, the man has become as one of us, to know good and evil. What if he stretches out his hand, and takes also from the tree of life, and eats, and lives forever?" And Yahweh God sent him out from the Garden of Eden, to till the ground from which he was taken. So he drove the man out, and placed cherubim east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming turning sword to guard the way to the tree of life. The significance of the tree of life is incredibly understated and downplayed. The most probable interpretation of the text is that Yahweh was trying to exaggerate and scare the humans off from the trees because he didn't want to have to compete with the power of elevated humans. It was a bluff. They didn't die after eating from the first tree. The tree was something which he likely did not create, or at the very least did not mean to create. Ultimately, the tree is a conduit from the primordial realm, from the Metadivine, which happened to persist through the process of creation and is likely a vestige of the former creation. It was a pesky artifact that survived from the former earth, which that former creation is only very briefly and indirectly hinted at in the Bible. Remember, the creation account in Genesis 1 is not actually the first time anything was created, and it's definitely not the first time anything existed, seeing as how Yahweh had to use Tehom to create the world over again. Yahweh, however, takes it very seriously, and it isn't really the garden that he blocked the humans from, but specifically the tree of life, before which he puts cherubim and flaming swords to guard it. If it were God's will that they should eat of it, then he wouldn't have commanded that they not eat of the trees of knowledge and of life, and he wouldn't have barred them from it after they left the garden. Therefore, no matter which way you frame it, the tree of life is not really a part of Yahweh's plan. I would call it a wrench in his plan. It's always good to keep in mind that the Jewish scribes who wrote the Bible are borrowing from older Babylonian myths, so the fact that the Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life are presented somewhat oddly and out of context in this story is precisely because these things were taken from an older and different story.